The Pacific Northwest was once quite different than it is today. A place where cathedral-like forests rich with life stretched unbroken across the valleys. A place where broad rivers and crystal-clear streams ran full with fish. A place where life for the native people was as bountiful and free from want as anywhere on the continent. But all that changed as the settlers came with their wagons and their dreams. Manifest destiny, some called it. A God-given right to tame and claim the land, to cut the forests, to plant the meadows, to dam the rivers, elbowing aside those who had always lived in harmony with their natural world. In 1854, Chief Seattle, appalled at what was happening to his beloved land, said, "This we know, the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood which unites a family. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it." Chief Seattle's counsel that all things are connected was ignored. The web of life in the Pacific Northwest continued to unravel. Fish, particularly salmon and the ocean-going trout known as steelhead, have always been a vital strand in that web. Today it is clear as many fish populations continue their downward spiral. Perhaps we should have heeded Chief Seattle's counsel that all things are connected, that soil erosion from forest clear-cuts can destroy salmon spawning grounds, that pesticides leaching from the land can poison the water, that dams can choke fish migrations, that overfishing steals from the future. People in the Northwest are slowly waking to the consequences of what was done in the name of progress. Today, as never before, efforts are underway across the region to weave at least that one strand called fish back into the Pacific Northwest's web of life. When the settlers first arrived in the Northwest, the salmon and steelhead fishing was simply incredible. In the early 1880s, the catch of salmon and steelhead on just the Columbia River averaged more than 30 million pounds each year. 35 packing houses sent cases of canned salmon by the boatload to grocery stores from Liverpool to Hong Kong. They thought it would never end. But soon the annual catch began slipping, and there was concern. Some remembered what happened back east to the once abundant Atlantic salmon. A victim of dams and overfishing, Atlantic salmon had all but disappeared from New England's rivers and streams. Around this same time, the late 1800s, fish culture was gaining popularity. Eggs and young fish called fry were planted in streams and rivers around the country. If it was argued salmon could be spawned and raised in hatcheries and then released to augment the natural runs, there would be no limit to the number of fish that could be caught. After initial skepticism, the concept of salmon hatcheries took hold. By the turn of the century, in Washington state alone, there were 14 hatcheries producing 58 million fry per year. How much these early hatcheries contributed to the total catch was anybody's guess, since there was no way of keeping track. While the number of pounds caught each year on the Columbia bounced up and down, on average the catch remained fairly constant until 1938. That was the year Bonneville Dam was completed. fishing on the Columbia would never be the same. Eventually, there would be 54 major hydroelectric dams in the Columbia Basin watershed and around Puget Sound. Some dams blocked fish migrations completely. The turbines of others took a heavy toll during fish migrations, and untold numbers were lost to predators or became disoriented in the slack water pools created behind the dams. It wasn't just the dams that caused salmon and steelhead numbers to plunge, but also what was happening along the streams where salmon spawn. Thousands upon thousands of miles of gravel-bottom streams, essential for salmon spawning, were silted over by soil erosion from lumbering operations. Mills, factories, and mines used the rivers as sewers for their industrial waste, polluting the water and often poisoning the fish. As towns and cities of the Northwest grew and expanded, as roads were built and rivers bridged, as farms and cattle crowded the stream banks, something had to give. More often than not, salmon and steelhead habitat suffered. The dream that fish hatcheries alone could fill the rivers with salmon and replace the fish lost because of dams, logging, mining, pollution, and overfishing just hasn't worked. One sad legacy of the prosperity the Northwest has enjoyed is today's growing list of threatened and endangered fish species. But the population decline of some fish runs is only part of the story of what's happening with salmon and steelhead in the Northwest. On other fronts, the news is more encouraging. Some Northwesterners now believe the long-range prospects to halt, even reverse the decline, are better today than ever before. In order to appreciate the challenges of fish restoration, one must know a little about the life cycle of salmon and steelhead. For most of these fish, life begins in a clear, cold mountain stream. With powerful slaps of her tail and with help from the swift current, the female salmon digs a nest in the gravelly stream bottom. Here she will deposit several thousand eggs among the pebbles and rocks. A waiting male immediately fertilizes them by releasing his sperm. She then covers the nest with gravel. For both male and female Pacific salmon, spawning is the final act of their lives. They die soon afterward, their decaying bodies nourishing the stream and its inhabitants. The eggs sheltered in the spaces between the rocks slowly develop in the oxygen-rich water. After several months, the salmon hatch, with their nourishing yolk sacs still attached. For another week or so, they remain protected in the recesses of the rocky nest. Once the yolk sac has been absorbed, the young fish swim up to face the hazards of stream life. Those that aren't soon eaten by other stream dwellers or swept away by the current stay in the area and feed for several months to a year or more before they begin another transformation. Triggered by their size, longer daylight hours, temperature, and hormonal changes, the young fish undergo a physiological transformation. They turn silvery and develop an overwhelming urge to swim downstream. They have become smolts and are ready to migrate to the ocean. As the weather warms and melting snow fills the streams, the smolts move downstream, riding the flood of water from the mountains into the rivers and out to the open Pacific. Life in the ocean is challenging, and many will not survive. Some will swim thousands of miles in a great circular loop across the Pacific. Others stay closer to the shore. After a year or more in the ocean, Just how long depends on the species and the individual fish. The biological clock strikes again. Now, with an urgency brought on by approaching sexual maturity, they return to the rivers and begin the long climb back to the very stream where they were born years before. How salmon and steelhead are able to find their way through hundreds of miles of rivers and finally locate the stream where they were born is a wonder of nature. Biologists believe that salmon can remember the chemical smell of their birth stream and are able to find and follow minute traces of that scent through a river as large as the Columbia. Once they return and spawn, the cycle is complete. It has been this way since prehistoric times. But now it is all very different. At every turn of their life cycle, there are obstacles to overcome, from dams to baited hooks. Actually, it's a wonder that any make it back at all. This is the reality that fishery biologists and managers face in trying to help salmon and steelhead populations. The challenge is clear. Since the dams aren't about to be torn down, fish passages must be redesigned and updated to minimize fish damage. Help must also come from better habitat and harvest management, as well as the continued improvement of fish hatchery operations. Hatcheries alone aren't the answer to restoring fish. It can be argued, though, were it not for today's hatchery production, there wouldn't be enough salmon and steelhead in the rivers and ocean to support any kind of fishing now or in the foreseeable future. The challenge in using the hatchery as a tool is to increase the quality of fish released so that more survive and return. In the past, hatchery success was measured by how many pounds of fish were put into the rivers. Today, the measure of success is how many adult fish return, both wild and hatchery. Years ago, hatchery fish were fed butcher shop scraps, decayed fish, dead farm animals, most anything available. Today's fish food is scientifically formulated to meet the changing nutritional needs of fish during different stages in their development. The goal is to achieve maximum growth per pound of food so that fish released from the hatchery are healthy and vigorous enough to compete and survive in the natural environment. Good, clean water with enough oxygen is crucial to fish health and is constantly monitored at the hatcheries. At its Abernathy Technology Center, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is experimenting with increasing the oxygen content of hatchery water to improve fish health and survival. As pristine and as beautiful as the rivers and streams of the Northwest may appear, the clear waters often harbor a variety of naturally occurring fish disease organisms. If these invade the hatchery environment, the results can be devastating. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service operates several fish health laboratories in the Northwest that monitor the health of hatchery fish. The goal is to detect a problem before it becomes serious